a regular meeting of the City of Milton Planning Commission. I'm Paul Moore, Chair. This is a 7-member commission appointed by the City of Milton Mayor and City Council, created for the purpose of holding public hearings and making recommendations on rezoning, use permits, concurrent variance applications, the comprehensive land use plan, the plan map, and other related plans and amendments to the zoning ordinance. In attendance this evening are Commissioners Fred Edwards, George Ragsdale, Jennifer Fletcher, myself, Paul Moore, and Commissioner Joe Kramer. We can skip all the stuff about application and public comment. I think so. At this time, shall we just stand? May I know your name, please?
Nick Melnikoff.
Nick
Melnikoff.
Melnikoff. Okay. The Pledge of Allegiance is going to be led this evening by Nick Melnikoff, who is here in attendance this evening as a Boy Scout.
Okay.
We'll just we'll face you.
You have any flags?
I pledge
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay. So we'll call the meeting to order. It is 7:08 on my watch on Tuesday, November 18th. So there is no public comment this evening. If not, can I have a motion to close public comment?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Public comment is closed. Okay, we have a couple of minutes to approve based on some of our past couple of meetings where.
You thought you were going to miss something, you really didn't.
I'm sorry, do I?
I was just saying, like, if they thought they were going to miss something, you really didn't.
Yeah. Okay, so first is the minutes of the September 22nd meeting, and Robin, that was the one.
With the correction about the vote, and it
Just
ended
the
up.
addition of the vote.
Yeah.
So, does anybody have any issues or questions regarding the minutes of that meeting at this point? If not, may I have a motion to approve the minutes of the September 22nd meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Robin, I can approve the ones that were in my packet then?
No. No.
What?
29. Oh, no.
Yeah,
Oh,
I have
that one.
fresh
I'm sorry,
copies
Paul.
for you to
Excuse me.
sign. I'll give them
Oh,
all to
all right.
you. They're in color and
Trying to
stuff.
see 'em all.
So what, the 29th now?
Gonna have to defer it, because I gotta recuse myself because I was absent.
Oh, wait, say that again?
You don't have enough votes to approve it unless Jennifer's gonna vote, and she wasn't here either.
Okay.
Oh, for the 29th, okay.
Okay, so we
Yep.
can defer it, make a motion, and
Okay. All right, may I have a,
I move we defer the September 29th minutes to the next meeting.
is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, so deferred.
You're not gonna be able to approve the October 27th.
Next one either, yeah.
Who's missing?
Which
I move we defer the October 27th minutes to the next meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, those are deferred.
okay. 1 out of 3.
Well, we're getting there. Curtis is out of town, and Carrie had another local contract.
Here's the clean copy.
Of course, I haven't had these to review, but I assume they're the same.
They are. They're exactly what you have in your packet.
Good, thank you. It is 11:18. Give those right back.
Thank you.
Okay, Robert, would you care to sound the next item then, please?
Okay. The first item is RZ 0904, text amendment to zoning ordinance to add Article 13, historic preservation. This item was deferred by the Planning Commission on August 25th, deferred by the Mayor and City Council on September 21st and October 19th. To allow the Planning Commission to continue the review, it is scheduled to go back to the Mayor and City Council on December 21st, 2009. So, I think you all have the both versions. So if
Anybody, I have a couple of things I discovered that were different than the notes I took from the meeting with Ken.
okay,
I've got a few things.
It just, yeah, mine are really minor as well, but they are nonetheless things we need to address. Should we just flip page by page then? Okay.
which one are you going to go by, the marked up or the clean copy?
I'm gonna go by the clean copy.
Okay.
Is that what you're using, Joe? Is the
I'm
clean
using
copy?
marked up, but they should, I mean, it's the same.
Okay, I just wanted, yeah.
I want to see what was changed.
Okay.
Can I just make one point before you, just as general?
Sure.
Not a big deal, but throughout the thing, there's all kinds of problems with indentations and spacing.
Okay.
And just, if you could just take a look at that, clean it up. Give an example,
Number one.
Well, number,
I mean, page one.
Page.
A.
yeah, just,
Hey.
I mean, it's throughout the whole thing. Page 11, where the lines and the headings E and F should be indented to follow, just throughout the whole document.
Okay.
Doesn't change anything, but just for purposes of aesthetics.
And you're looking at the clean
Yeah, right here.
Right.
copy?
It's like here, and then on the next page here.
Okay, yep, got it. I was looking for that stuff. Okay, anything on page 1 then, of the clean copy? No,
Nope.
page 2? Page 3? Page 4? No. Page 5?
Page 5, under paragraph 8, make
Okay.
such investigations and studies of matters relating to historic preservation, comma, insert comma, after the word preservation.
Okay.
got it.
What? Okay, that's on line 4. Okay. Make such after, I was actually looking for it because it was on the other page, so where do you need it
It's
to
on
be?
page 4 of the clean copy.
Yeah.
I'll go to
Okay,
page
is that it?
4, after the word preservation.
Okay.
Anything else
comma.
on that page? Okay, page 5?
Page 5, section 12. This is under the section of the powers, but the second line is a prohibition. Just worded funny.
So the donations, starting with donations, grants, and...
Yeah, only such does not violate the code of ethics. It's a,
That was actually reworded by Ken, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think we did
I have it.
and I have a suggested change. I don't think it really changes anything. I think it just times it up, makes it read a little bit better.
that. Okay. If you want to go ahead.
I would read, the way I would change it to read, receive donations, grants, funds, or gifts of historic property, and acquire and sell historic properties, provided such acceptance, so you're dropping down to the last line, provided such acceptance does not violate the city Milton Code of Ethics, and provided the mayor and city council provided prior consent to do so.
I like that.
If I can amend what you just said, I would, just so we don't use provided twice,
Yeah,
I would
take out
just say
that
prior
provided.
consented instead
Yeah.
of provided consent.
Okay, so, George or Joe, then read it again for us, please, with that change.
Receive donations, grants, funds, or gifts of historic property, and acquire and sell historic properties, provided such acceptance does not violate the City of Milton Code of Ethics, and the mayor and city council
Have prior consented to
have
do
prior
so.
consent to do so.
Consented.
Wait a minute, donations, grants, funds, mayor and city council have prior
Prior
Or say
consented.
previously,
yeah.
say previously consented to do
Yeah,
so.
that's fine.
The mayor, city councils have previously consented,
To do so.
yeah.
Okay. Anything else on page 5?
Under 14, I need a comment after the word "and" in the second line.
Okay.
And after the word "council" in the second line. So it reads, participate in private, state, and federal historic preservation programs and, comma, with the consent of the Milton City Council, comma, enter into agreements to do the same.
Okay. Anything else? On 5? Okay, on 6? 7?
I'm going back now on page 6.
Okay. 6. Clean copy?
Clean copy.
Okay.
Section 4, AD, the statement justifying individual boundaries.
Say again, Joe, section 4 what?
Section 4, A, D, yes and Dave.
Got it.
It's a documentation that's to be provided, said the statement justifying individual boundaries. I'm not really sure what that means.
That's just a question. You're just asking the question
Yeah,
about
I-
the statement.
I just put a question mark. I didn't know what that meant.
I mean, I suspect that would be like a survey, a statement justifying individual boundaries. I mean, it could be a survey that they present.
I think the intent there, and I know you're wrong, but I think the intent was the recommendation has to have a statement justifying why the boundaries that are being proposed are being proposed. The boundaries for the property.
Okay. No, that makes sense. All right.
You okay with that then? Do I see my other notes on that? Joe, you are okay then?
No, I'm okay.
All right.
That's understood.
Okay. Anything on 7? Anything on 8? Anything on 9?
I think you're going too fast for Joe.
Not usually. I have something on 10, but.
Just on 9, on 9,
first line?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. My first is under F. I thought we had struck
F where?
F, first line under HPC action,
Hmm?
in that paragraph. What is it? Small double I?
No.
I thought that was struck. Let's put back in here.
Small double I.
Yeah. Approve the certificate of appropriateness with any modifications it deems necessary.
Oh, okay, Abraham.
Because I thought,
I'm looking at
It
the,
is
I'm looking at with you guys, what Robin sent me as the document you worked off of, and all three are there. There's three choices. They can approve it, modify it, or reject it. The Romanettes were inserted to separate them, but that was all.
the reason I thought it was struck was because it was defined later in that section. Go back to my original. I don't have a note as to why. I just have it struck. That they may approve the certificate as proposed or reject it. So,
Yeah, I remember we had that discussion.
yeah.
I wasn't there, so I don't know. I'm not sure I understand your question.
Well, it's saying it's in subpoint I.
Yeah.
Is that how you call it that?
Romanet, yeah.
Romanet I. It's saying the HPC may approve the application for a certificate of appropriateness as proposed.
Right.
Then
Romanet 2 is approve it with modifications.
Maybe, no, it does say modifications.
And then
Or
Romanet 3
rejected,
says
and we
reject.
struck that. Ken had us strike that. It makes
Well-
sense that it be in with modifications. That it would
What
be
did
allowed to
he
stay.
have you strike? Because it didn't show up in what I had.
Yeah, we
Well, I guess
struck
what he's saying is I
everything-
didn't capture, if he asked it to be struck, then I might not have captured
No,
it, but
so-
I'd be
Well,
happy
but
to.
whether he suggested it be struck or not, I guess we need to go back and assess. I don't have a note as to why we decided to strike it,
Okay.
I just have it struck. So, and to George's point, you can approve it, you can modify it, or you can reject it. If we strike Romanet 2, you are removing the reference to approve it with modifications.
Which it should be.
And I don't recall why we would have struck that.
The only thing I recall, no, I thought no, I don't have, was that something, and it may not be in this section, that it was in somewhere else, but even if it was, it should be struck later rather than at that point, shouldn't it? If it,
Again, I wasn't here, so I'm looking at the notes that Robin sent out on October 30th. That she said attached to the edits that includes the discussion from the 10/27 meeting.
Right.
And the only difference between that and what's here is that I inserted the Romanettes. The language is the same. It says the HPC may, it's at the top of page 10 on those notes. It says the HPC may approve the application as proposed, approve the certificate with modifications it deems necessary, or reject it.
Right, what I'm saying, George, is in the 10/27 meeting,
Yeah.
that what she sent out didn't capture
Oh, okay.
that it was supposed to have been struck.
Okay.
But to my same point, I don't have a note as to why they would have struck that.
What did you have stricken?
All of Romanet 2,
So it was just an approve or reject, and that's it?
approve or reject,
Yeah, we did talk about that too.
yeah.
Well, I can do two things. I can talk to Ken and I can listen to the tape, to those two things
Okay.
to try to capture it back.
I'm gonna propose that you do that.
That's fine.
'Cause I wish I had taken a note. I just have it struck without without a reference as to why. I don't recall the conversation. And Joe, you don't remember anything in particular?
It seemed to me it was something to do with the fact that the commission couldn't, on its own, modify it. That they, if it didn't adhere to the requirements, they have to reject it, and it was up to the applicant to go back and change it based on suggestions.
That makes sense.
Come back before
That makes sense.
HPC and get approval, as opposed to
The HPC
on its
telling them,
own
yeah.
approving something that wasn't actually before it.
Okay.
That
was
makes
the
sense.
discussion.
That does remind me of the conversation.
Based
yeah.
on that, I would say strike it.
And that is
Yeah,
exactly
we
why
don't
we
need to go
struck
back
it.
and ask Ken.
Good.
Okay.
So that's for a minute too.
While we're here though, before we move away from that, I mean, Robin, this, I don't know how you're gonna do this, but this is an example of what Joe was talking about that's more than just indentation. There's a number 1 here, but there's no number 2. You don't need a number 1 if there's no number 2.
Okay,
So that paragraph can be brought out as a second paragraph and then go from there. So that
Okay.
so that the little ABC is gonna end up being numbers instead of letters.
And the same with the following, 1, 2, 3, 4, which should be
Right,
ABC.
right.
Yeah, I think what happened is when we deleted a bunch of stuff, then it deleted a second paragraph that used to be 2, so that's fine.
2 out.
Okay. So, 1 is struck.
No, 2 is struck. Talking about number,
No,
the number 1?
Number 1 is struck.
Oh, yeah.
And then the first appearance of the 1 is where A
A,
is.
right.
So it's 1, 2, 3 as covering ABC.
Right,
And then subordinate to B, where
A.
there's 1, 2, 3, 4, it becomes ABC.
right.
Right.
Lowercase.
Yep.
Got it.
Okay, and we are striking,
And same
Broken
thing,
into
same
2.
thing in 3, Paul.
yeah.
A through G.
So, I'm sorry, George, in 3,
3, the 1 through 7 just becomes A through G.
got it. Okay, any other changes on the balances of page 10 and 11?
G.
No? Page 12?
just a minor change in H1. Third to last line, the applicant, if he or she so desires, we can take that phrase out. There's no reason for that to be in there.
Yeah, you're right.
So it should read, the applicant may
Right.
make modification to the plans.
You don't need a
No,
comma.
comma. Okay, anything else on 12?
Um, In I1, and it's just a matter of getting the wording to track throughout all the ordinances. It talks about, second to last line, city obtain a cease and desist order from the appropriate tribunal. Make reference later to the Superior Court, Fulton County, or Fulton County Courts, or whatever it is, that all that language should track, and we should name the court wherever we.
Instead of tribunal?
That language was Ken's, not mine.
Oh, sure. I hear the defendant talk.
Trust me, I don't talk like that.
Tribunal.
Should read Superior Court of Fulton County.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, page 13, I have one. Under M in appeals, middle of the paragraph starts with, Milton City Council may approve, modify, or reject the determination made by the HPC if the governing body finds that the HPC, obviously it's a sentence that goes nowhere. That is supposed to stop after the first HPC. It says the Milton City Council may approve, modify, or reject the determination made by the HPC, period.
Period.
And the rest of that is struck.
No, it's not.
No.
It's supposed to start a new sentence with if. And there's no period after HPC. If the governing,
Yeah, for the Milton City Council may approve, modify, or reject determination made by the HPC, period.
Period.
That rest of that sentence was language left over from an earlier version where it said, if the governing
oh, I
body.
thought, I misunderstood. I thought Paul was saying take the rest of the paragraph out.
No,
Just
it's
the
the rest of that
line.
line, rest of that line.
Okay, so it starts with
Yeah,
appeals
it starts
from
again,
decision.
appeals
Yeah,
from
yeah,
decisions.
okay.
It
I
picks up again
misunderstood
with
you.
appeals.
Sorry.
Yeah, okay. We're all on the same page?
Yep.
Okay. Anything else on page 13? Okay. Page 14. I have a couple things here. Oh, the things that I've got come under the penalties provisions.
Okay.
Penalty provisions, because that was language that was going to be inserted by Ken that was appropriate. Sort of, we were guiding him, and we didn't come up with specific things there. We made some suggestions, but we haven't seen any of this language until it was sent to us by you, Robin.
Right.
So the first,
It was in the minutes that went out October 30th.
this language.
Yes. Got it right here.
Okay.
When Robin sent it out October 30th, she inserted the language that Ken had suggested.
Right.
Yep.
But this is the first time
Time
we're
you guys
we've
have
changed
seen
to
it,
address it.
like-
Oh, okay. I didn't
We
know
left.
that. I didn't know you
No.
had talked
Yeah.
about it
No,
then.
no, no, yeah, we had
Penalties
not-
we didn't address.
What happened,
Okay.
George?
Well, we
was,
talked about it.
We
Yeah.
talked about it.
Right.
And we gave suggestions to Ken.
Okay.
And then he provided this as the solution to that. But we've not been in.
Okay.
You haven't vetted it
as a
out.
Commission since then.
All right.
So, my question is under the penalties and provisions, in A and B, it references penalties to be defined as, by those codes and ordinance, or by the code of the ordinances.
Right.
Do we, I don't have that to refer to know what that is.
Okay. I can quickly go get it for you.
I'd like to know what they are.
Yeah. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I looked it up, so.
'Cause we had-
Actually, I
you know,
think
we
I
had
have
made
it
some
right
pretty-
here.
Some other sort of specific suggestions that were pretty punitive.
Right, and I think I included that in there. We just had to do. Right, but as you go down, it talks about restrictions to future development, no building permits or whatever.
Right, and
no
those,
per-
and parts of that are, or not parts, so actually all that part is completely okay with me. But I'm not gonna suggest I can speak for the group on their acceptance.
And I mean, you got, yeah, let me see what it says, chapter 12.
And we had talked about some pretty significant financial punitive numbers there that unless those are reflected in some way, shape, or form within the direction of A and B.
Can I make, well, while Robin's looking for that, can we go over just some other physical changes in the section?
Well, we would lose those if Robin's not
Yeah.
paying attention to it.
No, I mean, let's talk about it. I'm not,
Okay, sure.
my changes are all in C.
Yeah, mine are too. That's some additional ones. In fact, we reference historic district again.
Yeah,
I thought I got them all out, but I guess I missed
That's
them.
all right, we'll wait. I apologize, I would have gone and looked at that. I thought you guys had done that at the meeting. That's why I didn't even do anything with it except drop it in.
That's right.
it back, it's. Let's go to chapter 1, 3 violation. Goes back to chapter 1. Okay, well, I can't, there's penalties. Okay. It's penalties. For the first violation of this code section shall be a minimum fine of $100. The penalty for second violations, the same provisions, shall be $500. Third or repeat violations will be $1,000. But I don't. Then it refers back to chapter 1. Says, unless otherwise specified, no penalty issued for a violation of this article shall be inconsistent with the provisions set forth in chapter 1, Article 3 violations, section 1.
That language is all we need, I think.
Okay.
That's what we asked
That's the
for.
general. I mean, that's just that's the non-zoning one.
Right.
So,
That's.
but I know that everybody wanted something more,
Yeah.
you know.
Dramatically more. And we talked about $1,000 fine per
And we can, I mean,
road.
That's per day.
Still, it's $100 a day.
No, you didn't listen. It's 100, 500, and 1,000 for every day after the second day.
Can you read that again?
okay. Penalties for the first violation of this code section shall be a minimum fine of $100. The penalty for second violations of the same provisions of this code section by the same owner or tenant shall be a minimum fine of $500. Third or repeat violations of the same provisions of this code section by the same owner or tenant shall be a minimum fine of $1,000. I think the maximum is typically right now is $1,000.
I never heard per day. in that.
It's in
Yeah.
there.
This is in our ordinance. It defines each day as a separate offense.
Right, it goes back to that, so, yeah, I see what, yeah.
Up above.
Yeah, I see it. Yeah, I see it.
And those are minimums. Those aren't maximums.
So we're saying that because we say each day.
Yeah, and then at the end,
So that then refers back that those are per day.
and then,
Well, those are per offense. but
Right.
Each day is a separate offense. It ends up
So,
being per day.
right. Oh,
and then
yeah.
at that, the next part says, unless otherwise specified, no penalty issued for a violation of this article shall be inconsistent with the provisions set forth in chapter 1. And that says, unless specified elsewhere in the code, any violation of this code shall be punishable up to a maximum penalty allowed by state law. All fines shall be paid to the city treasury, community service, blah, 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 but it's later on. If it is deemed, by a court of competent jurisdiction that a punishment imposed under this section conflicts with the laws of Georgia, then state law applies to that particular punishment. In addition to the penalties provided in subsection A, any condition caused or permitted to exist in violation of any of the provisions of this code shall be deemed a public nuisance and may be abated by the city as provided by law, and each day that such condition continues shall be regarded as a new and separate offense. So that also helps to the.
Yep.
Those are code violations. Those are zoning violations, aren't they, in section 1?
No, this is all in the city code. It's non-zoning.
Okay.
But I don't know if they apply it to the zoning.
Well, you
It's separate.
separated them in here for A talks about violations as set forth in the zoning ordinance, and the other is the. is what
Right,
you
the
just
city
read.
code, yeah.
Okay, so in the instance of a demolition, where the the property owner, were to, without appropriate approval, demolish a building that has been deemed historic. Help me understand the application of that code to what happens to that.
Well, then it goes to C and everything underneath it, I believe, because it starts talking about,
No, it doesn't go to C. C is in addition to A and B.
Right.
okay.
So he's demolished the building. It's not just a matter of doing something, material change. The building's now gone.
Right.
You can't rectify the fact that the building's gone.
Right.
So,
You basically say you can't do anything with the site for 5 years.
right, and although that is punitive, we intended to impose a fine above that, a significant fine above that.
And we can still include that, that's fine. I just, that was something that I put together, and it's really up to you. If you guys want to do more, then that's fine.
Doing C doesn't take away A and B, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
theoretically, you have an indefinite period of violation every day that property sits there,
Right.
there's no violation.
And the 1,000 is a minimum.
Right. So, okay, so the application of the code, if it was $1,000 a day after demolition, obviously you can't rectify it. And what determines the end date?
There is no.
There isn't any. It'll be
So-
determined by a court saying that that's a
Right.
reasonable penalty, probably,
Right.
if he wants to go to court.
But it,
So at 30 days, he's theoretically subjected to a $30,000 fine.
26,000.
Right.
That is less than, one of the suggestions, I think that was Travis that actually made it, was that it was determined that it was, obviously determined already that it was a historic building. One of the suggestions was that we consider $1,000 for the year, every year the building was old. So it was a 50-year-old building. That's a $50,000 fine.
That's probably less than what this is.
Yeah, that's what I want to play out in this discussion, is,
Well, there is no cap on what you can fine him under the way this is written, except by whatever state law will allow, or a court.
right, which doesn't appear to be definitive that way, except
But I
for
mean,
by the corporate law.
to your point, I mean, if it's truly torn down, there's not anything you can do to replace it, so
Right.
the size of that is only a deterrent, right?
Right. That's,
Yeah.
that's the, that's, if you think about the examples that we've used in our discussion of this ordinance, we
Yeah.
know that no less than 3 structures, one of which in the dark of night disappeared, 2 others in the bright light of day
Which
disappeared.
ones are we talking about?
There was the one at Birmingham and Freemanville that went away, the house. There was the house on the now school board of education property in Freemanville, and there's the one that's at at Hopewell near the Milton, where Milton meets Alpharetta.
Mhm.
Those are the 3 that I'm thinking of that we cited as examples that went away.
Okay.
And obviously, nothing has happened since then, nor is it likely.
Yeah.
But,
But I guess the question is, are you looking for more punitive or less punitive or definite fine? Because the way this is written now, this is more punitive than anything you could ever possibly, I mean,
But-
the house would have to be
Oh, yeah.
300, 400, or 500 years old
Yeah.
in order to
Right.
come up to anywhere close to what this is.
But Paul, and I can't picture the second and third ones of what you mentioned, but let's talk about the one in Freemanville and Birmingham. Unless the owner of that house agreed to have that designated as an historic property.
Right.
He would be able to do exactly what he did.
right,
Unlikely he's gonna agree to have it designated if he intends to tear it down.
right.
So-
But
so-
there's this, there's the way this is written is that our HPC is going
Right.
to consist of people who are also going to identify structures that are likely.
But they still can't get it.
I know, and then the property owner has to eventually sign.
Right.
So it's unlikely that's going to happen in the future, but I also want to make sure that at some point, a property owner who has agreed to cooperate with determination that it's historic, that a developer doesn't come in and say, well, gee, I'll offer you X number of $1 million for your land, and that structure that we all saw value to goes away because it's not punitive enough for that structure to be preserved. So I don't know what the dollar amount is. I'm not in that business, and you know,
Well, I mean-
$10 may be a lot to me, but a $500,000 may not be enough to somebody who's looking at a multi-million-dollar land purchase.
This is open-ended.
But this is open-ended, I mean, this goes
Yeah, I guess
on
that's
and on
that's
and
how I
on.
want to play this out, is to make sure that that's the case. We know that it has to go to court. The court may determine that $1 million is appropriate, but I also want to make sure they don't determine that, gee, it's okay at $5,000. That it needs to have enough teeth in it, that it is something that they really have to stop and think about before that structure goes away.
But what do you feel is like enough teeth? I mean, I know.
Well, I don't know. That's what I'm saying. I want to make sure that the ordinance helps to define that. And if it's $1,000 a day, and we know that per month it's $26,000 to $30,000, that,
That's a minimum.
yeah,
I mean, it could be $10,000 a day.
right. And the courts decide that.
Well, I mean, somebody at the city's gonna decide what they're gonna assess as a fine, and if the guy wants to pay it, he'll pay it, and if he wants to appeal it, he'll appeal it.
Right.
But there really isn't any limit on what the city can set. And I don't think there's anything, I might be wrong, but I don't think there's anything in state law that says, that caps that. But I
Right.
could be
No,
wrong.
there'd be a point where the court will determine
Yeah.
what's reasonable.
Right.
Punitive, but reasonable.
I'll be honest with you, the one that concerns me more out of all the ones I'm familiar with is where the governing body approves a demolition permit for an historic property and allows it to be torn down. There's nothing in here that precludes that.
Yeah. So we need to add that.
I don't know what you can do about that. I mean, that's just,
Yeah. Well, if you look at what we have left, and we don't necessarily, Travis, do we have an inventory of what, under our current assessment of historic, as you guys were writing this as a committee?
That would be something the commission would have to renew as soon as they're formed. They'd have to go re-inventory what's there.
Yeah.
but off the top of your head, how many actual properties would you say we have in the city? Buildings?
Over 100 years in age, probably around 20, 2 dozen max. All those which are historic or potentially historic, a dozen max.
Yeah.
I mean, you're looking at, to Paul's point, it's like, what happens if they tear down what everybody considers a historic structure? It's not considered historic yet. If I kind of go back to what buildings will come before the HPC versus what buildings will come before the DRB, and I would think that somewhere there they have to decide, well, if it's over 50 years of age, they need to review it.
Trev, would you mind coming to the mic just to make sure we capture this? I think it's going to be important, whether it's a discussion for us or discussion by city council.
I think almost
Would you
needs to be a tier.
identify yourself, please?
Travis Allen, 13095, Region Trace, 143
Thank you.
I think what matters.
I have to look at that. but-
I think you have to have those tiers of what buildings, what determines if a building goes before the HPC, regardless of whether or not it's historic, versus what goes before design review board. So I think once you hit 50 years in age, it needs to go to the HPC first, or possibly design review first. They make a determination that, what potential does this have as a historic structure, or to the HPC. But, as C. Commissioner Raxdale's point is, you go back, well, it's not a historic building. Well, it's 150 years old. Owner didn't agree to call it historic, but what is there to keep them from tearing it down? There still needs to be something there there to be some kind of penalties for them tearing down a structure over a certain age, regardless of whether or not it's historic.
But the whole purpose of this ordinance that we're looking at is the establishment of the HBC and what their rules are, their powers and everything else. And there's no, first of all, there's no power for them to review the structure that's not declared historic. I mean, they can't.
Or trying to be declared historic.
Right, and the design review board can't send something to them and say, oh, take a look at this. They only can do what's within the ordinance.
really all I can think of.
Yeah.
I mean, that's very unfortunate.
Well,
I mean, I can think of one example of a building, probably the one that most everybody would agree is historic in Crabapple, would be the two-story Broadwell building. And I've spoken with a relative of the owner, and I don't think he would ever want it to be considered historic. How would it prevent him if he just wants to demolish it? I can't see anybody giving him a permit for it, but if it's not historic, then what penalties are in place to
Well, that's,
prevent it?
well, that's
No,
part of the
but
problem even with the design review board, even at this point. I mean, most buildings we look at are like 20 years old or 10-year-old, perfectly good house. But if there are buildings like that, you're right. There is no way, if push comes to shove, if they say no to the Broadwell building, he could sue and say, well, you have no
There's no
standing
basis
to
for
tell.
denying that.
Huh?
There's no basis for denying that.
Well, yeah, I get you. We're just all agreeing to the same point. It's,
Yeah.
Yeah.
there's nothing, there's no teeth to it. I mean, as much as, it's kind of silly on one side when we have to send a 10-year-old building to the DRB to demolish it. It's like, well, that's their prerogative to do that. Why do we have to waste their time? But that's just, but then on the other side, we want to make sure we keep track of things. But then even in that, in the end, if they want to, kick and scream and sue us, they can't. I mean, we don't have anything to hold them by.
Well, I mean, citing that building again as an example, what would stop city council from declaring it historic on their own?
From what terms?
What if city council decided that a building was historic on their own?
They can't do that.
To have
They can't do it
permission of the
without
property.
consent of the property owner.
It's not the way I read section 4.
Well, it can be, if I understand this,
Section
the
4,
HPC
C,
can
1A.
declare it historic, but you still, in order for it to be bound by the ordinance, it has to have
Oh,
the
yeah,
sign.
they can call it historic,
Right.
but it doesn't become historic
Yeah,
until the
but
property owner accepts
Travis's
it.
point, they
Yes.
can declare it historic.
Absolutely.
But until the homeowner or the
Yeah.
property owner agrees to that by signed affidavit,
Right.
it's not historic.
Right.
So let's.
That's kind of like declaring tomorrow's gonna be Monday.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But let's play that one out. And
Yeah.
This is one that's an interesting one because, and heaven forbid that's a, well, let me say it differently. In my mind, that building has historic value. When I look at Crabapple, and I'm only giving this example from my own perspective. I'm not suggesting it has any other value than my own perspective. But so I look at Crabapple and I look at that building. It has value because it helps define what Crabapple is, what's been there. It has some nuance to the not historic, to the period in which it was built. It has landmark value, and it has age value from the standpoint of what we are calling something that is in keeping with what defines Milton. Okay, those are all pretty soft ways of saying it has value. And let's say we know that there's going to be more demand pressure or more pressure to develop Crabapple. And one of the issues in developing Crabapple is traffic. In order to solve the traffic problem, it would be easier if that building wasn't there to solve the intersection problem. So a developer comes in and says, providing all the other issues that have to be cleared. I know there's a million hurdles that have to be cleared for that to play out, obviously. When does the historic value of that to me and others like me who think that has value, where do we hit that crossroads where we say to that guy, you can't knock it down? Well, we can't, based on what the ordinance says today. And there's nothing today that makes him have to do that.
Is anyone aware of any other situation that we could look at that would protect that? Paul, I understand the way it's written that, whoever owns it, if they say, hey, I'm not making it, as Travis says, historic, we're out of luck, or we, or the
Yeah,
city,
that
or
person
whatever.
might just be
But is there,
4 walls of stacked bricks.
how about some other city or that? Is there some way they could get around that?
I certainly don't know any, Fred, but it's a good question.
I think the answer is no. I mean, I talked with Ken about that, so it was one of the points that we talked about in a couple of our meetings at length, right? I mean, that you're, absent the property owner's approval to do that, you're taking away a property right that
Right.
he has, and you're putting restrictions on his property without his consent, and you can't do it.
I look back at, I think it's, California has what they call the Mills Act, which incentive-wise is tiered, just as I suggested earlier, that I think they can, for incentive-wise, they can earn, tax credit of 25% of the rehabilitation cost of a historic structure, but if it's a structure over a certain age, they can earn 10%. So if they can do incentives on a property regardless, you know, historic versus non-historic, why wouldn't it be able to reverse that and do penalties?
Because the whole point of incentives is to solve the situation you're talking about and preserve those property rights. It's trying to convince that guy that doesn't want to do it to do it.
Well, I guess to move our evening along, I'm gonna propose that, because I was gonna brought the question up, we leave A and B as it stands, but we also know that in doing so, that it does not address that larger issue of a homeowner that is gonna include that they're non-participative in the historic designation. And as such, they wouldn't be subjected to any of the things bound that would be bound to in the ordinance in A and B. We need to find a way, not tonight, but allowing this to go forward to address that. Does anybody think any issue with that?
Well, I'm not sure what you're saying. I mean, if you're suggesting, I mean, I'm all for going forward, I agree with that part, but if you're suggesting we try and find a way to penalize the homeowner for tearing down something.
No,
because-
I'm suggesting that we think about ways to incentivize them to want to
Okay,
participate.
I'm for
And
that.
as such, when
Sure.
they do, then they're bound
Sure,
to that.
I'm for that.
Okay.
And I think that in part the incentivizing was gonna come when the HPC is created, so that'll be part of
Sure,
there.
and
And
this
that
can
was
always
some,
be amended by adding some kind of
Right.
incentive provision, sure.
well,
That's exactly what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that the ordinance itself is pretty darn close to what it needs to be, again, in my mind. And as such, when the HPC is created, there's a whole bunch of stuff that may, a lot of nuance or profound things that may come forward once you've got smarter minds than mine thinking about how something historic comes into play in Milton.
and that's what Councilmember Tart had at the last council meeting. He made that statement that he wanted that to be worked on once the HPC was created, so he was very aware of that as well.
Okay.
The incentives.
Yeah, to incentivize
I
whether
mean, I think
it's
that should be like one of the top.
tax abatements
Yeah.
or whatever,
Something
whatever,
like that.
so.
Yeah,
Because
a lot
if not, it just
more
looks
research
fine.
needs to be done that. From what I've seen though, just
Well,
nothing
maybe a
that
lot of
fits a
people.
city like Milton. Most of the stuff
To
fits
me,
like.
to me,
large metro areas.
personally, I think we're making a mistake if we limit that discussion or work or whatever to just historic buildings, because this comes up all the time, right?
Yeah.
How do we get people that have 10-acre lots to preserve 10-acre lots? There needs to be incentives for people. If we want things to stay the way they are, there's got to be incentives created for people to do that. It's
Yeah.
not just historic property.
And the offset to that, when you do those sort of things, people say, oh, you're gonna reduce the tax record then when you do that. But the offset to that is because if you are preserving those things,
There's no
the
free lunch.
offset comes in increased home values or property values for those that are already built or plan to be built with the way the comprehensive plan plays out.
Well, I think Travis' last meeting comment, maybe it's not from historic, but it's something that was built in the 50s. It's really, I forget the example you used, and that's something that, it's not historic, but we want to preserve that as part of the community. And so that gets back to your point. We got some kind of a grouping of incentives that would say, hey, don't tear this down. This is one of a kind in the whole country.
But there's a downside to that too. I mean, you gotta be careful that you don't create the incentives, and so you got people lined up at your door saying, hey, my house is historic, I want it.
No, or this is the only home that has a bathroom in the basement or some,
Yeah, unique.
True, okay. Well, may
It
get
goes
carried.
back to the Rock. We
Mhm.
build the Rock, but the
Same.
Rock may have historic value.
Yes.
If the guy sells the property and the developer says, gee, this rock's in the way,
Mm-hmm, we'll tear it down.
the Cherokee rock's gone. So, okay, all right, well, we're on the same page.
So,
Can we,
Yep.
make the mechanical changes though and see?
Sure.
I think,
Yeah.
I think the first sentence
Hold on,
should.
just to, so we're
Sure,
leaving
sure,
A,
sure.
and just to finish the discussion on A and B. So A and B is standing as the ordinance is defined. And I think that there is some, thank you with help for helping me understand, to understand the significance of the fines that are there.
Sure.
It does not address demolition, but obviously that's what's produced the whole discussion about the cooperating or non-cooperating, landowner.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So now C.
First thing is just a title, restriction on future development. The first sentence should read, if an historic property,
Yeah.
and then cross out resource and everything through all the way to district. So it should say, if an historic property is demolished or relocated, blah, 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 blah. And then later in that sentence, same sentence, historic review
It picks up
board.
again where, George? If I start property,
You take everything out on the second line except for the last word is.
yeah, okay, that's where I was. Thank you.
And then about 4 lines down, historic review board should just be HPC. And then on the next page in C4, I think we want the real property records to be real property records of Milton, not Fulton County.
Yeah, because it will be Fulton, it's no longer Fulton. It will be
Right.
Fulton. So would it read property records of the city of Milton?
Right.
Okay.
That was it as far as I know.
Anybody else? Those are the last things I have as well.
Just two housekeeping things. On page 14, in 3, up towards the top of the page,
Right.
third sentence, ordinance end at the direction of the Milton City Council, should be comma instead of a
Right.
semicolon. And under section 6, penalty provisions, that very first sentence, just to clean up that he, she, it stuff.
Okay.
Where are
Okay.
you now? I'm sorry.
Penalty provisions.
That first
In the middle.
sentence.
Uh-huh.
Suggesting changing language to read, violation of this ordinance by any person, firm, corporation, or other entity is an offense, period.
How about constitutes?
Constitutes is fine.
So please repeat and I'll write it down.
Violation of this ordinance by any person, firm, corporation, or other entity constitutes an offense.
Anything else, Joe? I move that with all those changes incorporated, we approve this ordinance for forwarding to city council.
Second?
second?
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you.
Hey, Robin, I'm sure under that section 7, that C, there's the computer jump, there's a comma that's at least in the, I'm
Yeah.
sure you'll pick
Yeah,
that up.
I saw
Okay.
that.
That wasn't anything.
Thank you, Curtis.
Yes, that's right. I didn't want Curtis to be left out of it.
Let the minutes reflect that Curtis pointed out.
Yeah.
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 I'm glad you clarified, because I couldn't,
From Pittsburgh,
I didn't
where he
understand.
is,
I
or
was like,
something
oh,
like
I
that.
was totally lost, and I had, what's the ordinance say?
Somebody give me the time, so if I have to go back, I
I
can
have
track it down.
8. I have 8:08.
Okay.
And Robin, just real quick, page 6, will we catch the A, B, C designation under section 4? It goes from A to B to D.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Oh, I bet you.
Yeah.
Sound like air conditioner.
The air conditioning.
Missed that.
I'll stop.
Sleep there.
Okay, so, the next item on our agenda is courtesy review of the ordinance regulating the location, placement, and leasing of wireless telecommunication facilities.
Thanks, Travis.
Thank you.
You don't want to stay for the telecommunications?
No, my cell phone is dying.
Okay.
We need another tower to help, I guess.
Oh, you're the expert, Paul, right?
Well, I do have some
That's good
questions
to know.
and comments on
Before
it.
before we start doing anything with this, can you put this in context for me?
Sure.
What is a courtesy review? Why are we being asked to do this?
Yeah, what do they expect?
What
Do
are
we
they
have any role
expecting?
to play in any?
Technically, no.
And why are we doing it?
Because Tom suggested if you guys had any comments or anything glaring or any suggestions.
Okay.
So-
But so the process is that city council is going to consider it at their next
Right, there's
workshop?
already been a
No,
work
it's at
session.
workshop.
There's been a work session, and then it's had its first read this past Monday. And then it's going to city council, what is the 6th of December, whatever that first
December 21st.
Monday.
Oh, the first one?
December 7th, yeah. It's basically intended, we had put it together a couple years ago, and then there was some of the council members had wanted any location, any cellular tower location on city property originally was meant that they didn't have to go through a public hearing, so that was nixed, but then it was just kind of dropped. And then I had told Tom that there's gonna be some cell tower applications. In fact, I'm anticipating one this coming next week.
Really?
And then there should be 2 more subsequent ones in the next couple of months.
New towers?
Mm-hmm.
So this, again, to put it in context, this is being proposed as a replacement for what's currently section 1947 of
Right.
the zoning ordinance.
Right,
So it
so-
will become part of the zoning ordinance.
No. It basically, it will not be. It'll be eliminated, it'll be eliminating that use permit because now it's gonna become city code and it will no longer go.
What is in section 1947 of the zoning ordinance?
It's the portion that any tower above a certain height in AG1,
Right.
you know, they have to have a public hearing. There's another section
Right.
in 19.3, which is an administrative permit. And
Right.
so this ordinance will not replace, but it'll substitute for it. It'll be eliminated from the zoning ordinance, the 19.4, whatever,
.7. yeah.
.7, and then everything will be going through the city council.
See, okay. First, I mean, I think this is very misleading in that respect because it doesn't say any of that. It says it's superseded. It doesn't say that that's being removed. It implies that this is going in its place.
Well, it's a city code, so no, it's not going, it's not like the historic preservation ordinance, it's going into the zoning ordinance, it's a separate city code, portion of it. And I'm not sure why that is,
Wait a minute, now you said something different. Is it or is it not going to be part of the zoning ordinance?
it will not
It
be.
will not be. Say-
I was just comparing it to the historic preservation
Okay,
ordinance.
So that's what I'm saying, it's misleading. So the purpose is to establish guidelines, but it's not gonna be part of the zoning ordinance. It means it's outside of the purview of the planning commission, the design review board, and the
Actually, there's some sections
board of
that,
zoning appeals.
It does.
well, it
require
will,
zoning appeal.
actually, it does
understand.
mention the
Huh?
design, it does mention the design review board, or that may be included.
The Board of
How does it
Zoning
get
Appeals.
And the
before-
Board of Zoning
How does it
Appeals.
get before the design review board or the board of zoning appeals if it's not part of the zoning ordinance?
Well, if it asks for them to look at it, the ordinance could ask it to look at it. And then the Board of Zoning Appeals is if there's an appeal.
Of a zoning ordinance. They don't have any purview.
Well, no, I will say that there's other city ordinances, like the construction sections, the development code, which is not in the zoning ordinance.
The development code is referenced as part of the zoning ordinance.
Well, there's a whole big section that, but it really is in the city, it's in the city code.
But the, okay.
Well, I mean, I do know that they do
The Board of
go.
Zoning Appeals purview is the zoning ordinance. And, I mean, anything that's referenced in the zoning ordinance, that's fine. I'm not taking issue with that. But if this is sitting, this is like saying, you know, there's a, for example, the part of the city code is that you right to establish franchise fees, right?
Right.
The Board of Zoning Appeals has no rights to review that process for establishing franchise fees, right? Because it has nothing to do with the zoning ordinance. If this is gonna be outside the zoning ordinance and not referenced in the zoning ordinance, then the Board of Zoning Appeals and the Design Review Board has no purview over it. Robin, I'm not trying to be argumentative, but that's why I asked the question, because like Paul said, there are references in here to the Board of Zoning Appeals and the Design Review Board that don't work if, you know, and the Planning Commission.
And the planning commission, that's fine, but there's no role.
Yeah.
Which is one of my key questions was what, if it's gonna be a change to land use or something, why would that not come before us?
Well-
It seems like it is, running on a parallel course, and it can't. It has to cross and be included in as an ordinance.
Well, I know the attorneys have reviewed it, and I got some comments back, and there wasn't mention of that, but I can follow up with them about those questions.
It also references the Historic Preservation Commission, which doesn't.
Right, I know, we fixed it, we're fixing, yeah. Well, there actually is a section that talks about historic structures, but the definition of historic structures in relation to cellular towers is only apropos, at least at this point, by a national register, but the attorney said we could put in to say other historic, whether it's state or
I think
city.
it referenced district as well, which one's.
Right, and we can fix that.
Yeah.
Let's see.
And I have questions. I mean, the latter part of this is boilerplate and not much we need to do with. But the front part of this, including, I mean, things within definitions, there are some things we need to talk about. But it is, to George's point, it is moot. It has no value whatsoever if it's not tied into ordinance. And I think we're setting ourselves up as a city for all kinds of problems if you don't have an ordinance that addresses this stuff.
Well, I mean, plus, you know, the definition of an alternative tower structure means blah, 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 that in the opinion of the city council are comparable with the natural setting. I mean, when did we elevate the city council to be the ones that are rendering that opinion?
Yeah. And for example, co-location is in the definition. It references a personal service provider and references personal service provider nowhere else in the ordinance.
Yeah.
And to define it as narrowly as that is a mistake. It makes no reference to future technology in here because it's not necessarily going to be technology that always will require towers in the future. We could, you know, there's going to be a point in time where the things that we're doing with cellular today are going to be very different.
I'm showing my ignorance, but when you talk about co-location, is it not feasible to have two towers on the same property?
What really makes sense, George, is there's one structure and two carriers share the structure.
No, I
There's no
understand.
reason for this construction of a second tower in today's technology.
Okay.
So you may have a site that you determined is appropriate because of height and coverage. Because you got a hill and a certain amount of density of trees or buildings or whatever between you and the next location. You have lousy cell phone coverage. They're trying to overcome that. But there's no reason for Verizon to build a tower where AT&T's already got one.
That was my question,
They
Peter,
put
what are
theirs.
the new ones?
Well, it's funny, I circled exactly the same word. So glad referring to new. There's absolutely, in today's technology, zero need for a new tower anywhere in our city if they take advantage of the existing towers.
Well, again, I'm showing my ignorance, but I thought it was kind of funny that they were gonna ask people to remove them when they were ceasing to function. How do you know when they're ceasing to function?
Well, there will be technology changes that will at some point render them, but who's to determine that? I wrote the same thing, I said, and it makes reference to the fact that they're supposed to advise the city.
Yeah.
Well, they're never gonna
Yeah,
advise
oh,
the city.
by the way, I'm not gonna use that, so I'll tear it down.
Yeah, so I'll incur the cost to tear it
Right,
down.
right.
But
Yeah, so there's all kinds of stuff like that
But-
in here.
go back. Oh, wait a minute.
You know, and if it talks about pre-existing
So-
towers and,
So Paul, can you help me understand, so why would there be 3 towers? I mean, and I know the locations of them, there are areas that, there are no towers nearby, okay, at least according to the siting and what I know.
yeah.
Why would a carrier go to the expense of putting up a tower that was not needed?
Because before they felt it was important to have it proprietary, to have it be their own.
But I mean,
And-
what I was told was there was no more room to co-locate on certain towers.
I think I don't know who told you that, but I don't
Well, the
think that's
person who's applying.
true. I don't think that's true.
And that's part of what they have to prove, is that they have
I'm
to
not
prove.
an expert in that.
No, I
but
know, I'm just trying to
But
get.
my knowledge that I do have working for a
Right.
cellular company is such that I think that they can't coexist.
Is
Definitely.
a monopole by definition, I mean, is that what I think it means, that there's only one user on it, or does that mean?
No, I think
one
it's the
pole with
structure.
multiple
No, the
users?
monopole is just by.
It's a cylindrical self-porting, that is, not supported by guy wire.
All right, Joe.
Towers,
Yeah.
they're single spaced.
I know that, I know that's not my question.
Yeah, there's-
What does the picture mean in terms of the number of carriers that are on there, is what I'm asking.
No, and the monopole has no.
It's just a
limit?
structure.
No, number of-
Okay, that's what I was asking, I didn't know whether that meant you could only have one
Yeah, I
user
mean,
on there.
for example, if you look at the middle picture.
Yeah.
Where it's, what, I'm assuming that those little things hanging off to the right of that are
Yeah.
probably like,
No,
dishes.
those are tree limbs to make it look like it's a
Oh, shut
Well,
up.
tree.
Those
Your name's Sheila.
could have been intended, well, for the sake of the example, let's pretend those are dishes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
That would be an example of how they could coexist on the same structure. Somebody's just not
but
quite as high.
can you
as
do that same thing on a monopole?
Yeah, I
That's
don't
my-
see why not.
Okay, all right, that's what I was asking,
Yeah.
technology wise, I didn't know.
But right now, Robin, you said someone is gonna apply. Where does this fall into?
Well, the
who-
first
who
one that's gonna
approves it and
come,
who-
okay, the first one that's gonna, from what I understand, they've done all the environmental studies, they've got everything together, because it took like 12 weeks to do all the stuff they have to do to get ready for it. That they should be applying next Tuesday, and it will be prior to the, they'll be under the use permit provisions under the zoning ordinance.
Which means it'll come to us next
Right,
session.
correct, yes.
Oh, well, that's.
So it'll
I
come
wanted
to
to-
you in January.
Did you understand that, Paul? That-
But that's
That it
until,
would come to us? at
but that's
this
only
point?
for, yeah,
This point.
but
Well,
until
from
we,
what she's saying.
Yeah.
Right, for the reasons she's saying.
is,
trying to
and
do
then
it.
That's
any
what I
other
was- no,
subsequent,
no, that's
and
what
the
I wanted to make sure
subsequent
that-
ones.
Where was it before this? That's
It
what
was,
I-
it was there, but I'm just saying is that the motivation was to be able to have the applicants provide more information and prove that they really have to have it in that location, and that's the purpose of this ordinance, whereas the current ordinance doesn't really require all
But-
that
and
information.
as you said in the beginning, and to bypass a public hearing.
Well, originally it was set to buy if it was located on a city property. Well, now we've changed the ordinance, so now there will be the public hearing
In front of whom?
in front of the city council, but not, you're right, not in front of planning commission.
That's, okay. I just want to make sure I
Right,
understood.
and so
So it's just,
when and
this
if
says
this
it's
gets-
eliminating.
Right, I mean, when and if this gets approved, then any subsequent applications will go under the ordinance, the city ordinance. And I'm anticipating 2 more after this first one,
So,
sometime in December or January later on.
so my understanding under the city ordinance, then we would not see.
Correct. But you're right, I don't know why they have the planning
Here we
commission
go
even
again.
mentioned
Yeah.
in it if,
Yeah, to George's point, yeah, this is.
Well, I just want,
Well, I'm not sure what we
I mean, if you don't, I mean, I think Tom just wanted you to, I mean, you guys bring up some good points, so I mean, it's definitely
Can we get
some-
the comments that we've made recorded in the minutes so that they can be reported that way? Because I mean, personally, I object to the whole idea of taking it out of the zoning ordinance.
Yeah, I mean,
Right,
well,
without
I
getting
can't
down
take,
in-
I mean, I will definitely take notes, but I can't take verbatim minutes.
No, but I'm saying.
I will take
maybe
it back to the
if-
council.
If we need to make it into a motion, I'll be happy to do that, but I personally, there's no point in getting down into the weeds in this if the point of it is to take it out of the zoning process, because we're not ever gonna look at it.
Right.
And I object to that. I think it should be part of the normal zoning approval process.
I agree.
Okay.
I think we ought to do a
Is there
motion.
anybody who
Yeah,
doesn't
we can
agree
do
with
that.
And Joe, you have the same opinion?
Okay.
I share that opinion. Jennifer, are you?
I mean, I think that would be good to
Okay,
make a
so that's
motion
five
and
of
be
us
part of the,
Who are here tonight who have very strong, I'm going to inject those words, have very strong feelings about that. And it's, they gotta knock that stuff off.
Well,
Can you set- can-
I move that we recommend to the city council that the regulation, location, placement, and leasing of wireless telecommunications facilities remain under the purview of remain part of the zoning ordinance and not be removed from the purview of the planning commission, the Board of Zoning Appeals, and the DRB.
Second.
Okay, is that a formal motion?
Yes.
Okay, and there was a second, okay.
who was the second?
Jennifer.
Okay.
Is there any discussion? Second, we've already had. Okay. Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thank you, George. So, that being said, I don't understand then, I guess, beyond that, why we need to dig into this at this point.
Nope,
We don't.
we don't. I think the motion handles it.
Yeah, and my goodness, I spent several hours reading this with that question hanging over it. It was like, why am I doing this when it's a mistake to take it out of the ordinance? But because there's a lot of questions that need to be asked that are not addressed in the information that we have today.
Robin, just out of curiosity, was this ordinance developed by these people that are coming in with their applications?
That's a good question.
Who developed the ordinance?
Just came from somewhere else.
Yeah, it was I didn't work on it, but it was created a couple of years ago, so I'm not sure if it was from a model ordinance or what.
State
so-
model code.
Yeah.
Okay. The Uniform Telecommunications Code.
Yeah, I mean, for example, it talks about the use of microcells, and it's inconsistent in its application throughout this. It references it in some instances, and it doesn't reference it in others. If you talk, and it does not address future technologies at all.
That's why you spent 2 hours on it.
Well, we
Yeah.
don't,
I don't even know
we
what
don't
you're talking
force,
about.
there's nothing in this that forces the co-use of towers. Then there's some aesthetic things about lighting, and there's FAA requirements. It doesn't address, it kind of blurs over private radio towers, like for somebody using like a walkie-talkie or a broadband radio. And
Right.
those need to be restricted as well. There are FCC codes that need to be addressed by that. And somebody using a radio above 2 watts, I think maybe including 2 watts, has to have an FCC license to do so.
Okay.
And there's a bunch of regulations that come along with that.
Well, I think this is all very good information, so I'm sorry that you think, I don't think it was a waste of time for you to review it. I mean, I think it's good input and, so.
And this was a request by Tom?
And then you
It was also agreed upon with the city council because it was at a work session and that was a suggestion that they wanted y'all to look at it too, so, I mean,
I don't think any of us will take
Monday
offense
we
to
met.
going back and reviewing it.
city council saw this for the first time last Monday.
Last Monday. when
No,
we were-
they saw it, they saw it at a work session a few weeks ago, and they've had it for
This is the document you handed out last Monday. 'Cause
After
I got it
a
from
week
you
ago
last
Monday. Yeah, it was the last work session.
Right.
They had it before
That
that.
was- that was the
I'd sent
ninth.
it out, but yeah.
I don't mean 2 days ago, I meant a week.
Right,
Yeah, it was the 9th.
But didn't someone present something that night after we left on this subject?
Tom talked about it, but it was, he kind of
There was no
reintroduced
formal
it.
presentation.
And then the only comments we've gotten are from Julie, so that we're trying to address her comments and the city attorney, so she's the only one. Thus far that I've heard, that I've gotten comments from about it.
Okay, so,
Bite your tongue.
No, I can't. Paul?
Sure.
Could I, if this tower guy comes within the next,
He's coming to our next meeting.
yeah.
Well,
will
in
be here at our next
in
meeting. So we're-
January.
okay, January, so
Yeah.
we're, okay.
Yeah, the
I just
first
did
one,
not
you're
make sure
definitely,
this
the
goes-
first
Wait a minute.
one.
He'll be here in January?
Well, because the application deadline's December 2nd, and then,
So
He
he's
doesn't come
gonna
back.
wait to put in his application till after December 2nd?
well, right, they've been working on it for like 3 or 4 months. I've been talking to them consistently, so they're gonna submit it,
But
and
if he-
then.
But if he's smart and he wants to bypass the planning commission, he's gonna wait to submit his
Exactly. That
application
was
till
my-
after this is approved.
Thank you, sir. That's why I asked the question. Because why would, knowing that,
Yeah.
he ain't gonna be here. Okay.
Well, and I've actually
I guess I
given that
should've put that
person
in.
the draft of this, so they know what,
You've given the applicant a draft of this?
Yeah. A few weeks ago, like 6 weeks ago. Because part of it is that they expect they want a lot of the information that this asks for, that the use permit doesn't ask for. Because you know that they'll want to know that information, whether there's an ordinance or not.
Is the applicant a major
Yeah.
corporation?
Well, the person is making the application for T-Mobile.
I figured it was AT&T, Verizon, or T-Mobile, that's the three that would make most sense. Any one of those three.
T-Mobile needs the help.
Well, They've also got the bank of attorneys looking at this and laughing, saying, this is gonna be fun. Let's hurry up and do it. Or in this case, let's hurry up and wait.
Not do it.
Hurry up and wait not to not do it, because we'll be better served by waiting.
Well, I don't know if it's gotten to that point, because the person who I'm dealing with sounds like a contractor doing it for T-Mobile. It's not like representatives directly from the corporation is
Yeah,
doing
and
it.
and as a city, there are, let me say this differently. There's no reason for the city to get in the way of improving telecommunications. We absolutely should provide all of the things that a carrier should need to provide adequate coverage for its subscribers in this area. But there are ways to do that using existing facilities without having to do new stuff. And that's what we have to make sure that we are careful of. Support and apply the things that require change from technology, but also support and require the use of existing things where technology hasn't changed or technology's gotten better, so that it doesn't change the face of our city.
So you don't see that this ordinance provides, at least having them to prove that there's no other way for them to provide service than
What I'm
creating.
suggesting is that if they're asking for another tower, I don't know that they're asking for that, but
Well, they are.
in that example, I'm suggesting that in my limited understanding as a member of as an employee of a company that's in that industry, I don't see any reason for a new tower to provide additional coverage today that can't be accomplished with existing towers owned by other carriers.
There's 11, according to this map, there's 11 towers in Milton and 1 permitted.
Yeah. Now, I'll give you the example.
Well, no, what it means is there's others were permitted, but there's one permitted but not built.
You mean the green ones aren't built?
Let's see.
Probably won't. But I'll give you an example of how that works. I'm an AT&T subscriber today, and I have lousy AT&T coverage at my house. But when I was a Verizon subscriber, I had excellent coverage at my house. It's just because the AT&T tower today has some sort of diminished,
And one permitted right here.
diminished frequency coming to my home. So the coverage is less.
This one right here.
If AT&T were using the Verizon tower, that must be taller or in a better location, I would have excellent AT&T coverage at my house. So that's exactly what I'm talking about.
What if Verizon says you can't use my tower, then what do they do?
Well, that's our ordinance should suggest that they have to. That it should be governed so that they have to coexist on those towers.
Okay, yeah, the green ones exist,
Right, so there's 11 of those.
and then there's one
One permitted.
permitted
by
but not
Corvette.
built.
Sorry?
It's permitted by use permit, but for some reason they didn't build
Right,
it.
it's down by Crabbe. So there's 11 existing and one permitted in Milton.
Right.
Seems like enough for me.
Yeah, it's not that big an area, and we don't have that.
And actually,
kind of
there's
topography
one
changes
that I'm having the GIS people put on, there's actually one at Station 42 on Thompson Road, and that's kind of in the middle, so
Yeah.
that's gonna be changed to add that.
Is the one up at the top actually on Richard Mountain? Very close to it?
Right in the middle.
Yeah.
At the top.
I mean,
Where'd you get a color from?
Printed it.
You should have the same one, don't you have a
No,
color?
mine.
Mine's black and white.
From you is black and white.
Oh, I think I gave you that one from
You
the,
did.
Oh, he got his the other night at the meeting.
I cheated.
and then, I think Kim
Yes.
Horn got pissed because you got the last, I'm sorry, I'm not recording, she got mad. Because,
Yeah. Thanks.
and Jeanette was like, go make some more, I'm like,
Paul, not to digress to that, because we're not even looking at this thing, but what's in here, because I didn't see it, but what's in here that would force, let's say, in your example, force Verizon to accept AT&T?
There's nothing in here that forces that. That's my point.
But so if AT&T comes and says, we gotta build a tower, and we say, well, Verizon has a tower, use theirs, and Verizon says no, then
I forgot who you're citing is who had the tower. Verizon has the tower and AT&T wants to use it, then AT&T has to make it financially feasible.
or even at that, Verizon says no.
Yeah, then they don't get the coverage.
But they gotta build a tower.
We don't have to grant them the right to
No,
build
no,
a
no,
tower.
I'm saying your option, your only other option is to build a tower.
Yeah.
And if you start out with the premise that we want to provide all our citizens with property coverage, then that kind of leads you down the road to say,
Gotta build a tower.
we gotta build a tower.
But then if we're allowed to build a tower, then there's other stuff I'd want to address in here as to when, where, and how tall, and what it
the
looks
fact that
like.
they have to allow others to use their tower.
Yeah, exactly. And those things aren't, that new tower wouldn't be required to allow for co-use and be aesthetically pleasing and have setbacks where, I mean, for example, it addresses setback for height from residences in here, but it doesn't address setback from any other building or structure. It's, it's a tumble factor. If it were to, for some reason, to tumble, if it's a mono pole or a guide pole that have the risk of falling versus a tripod or a four corner, or heaven forbid in high wind storm, and that structure were to tumble, it only addresses the fact that it has to be set back from a residence. And here it doesn't address buildings or schools, or maybe it addresses schools. I think there was something about schools, but it doesn't address if it's on Highway 9. Then it can be right next to a building. And that's a problem. Now, I'm not aware of any tumbling. Hasn't made the news, but
Yeah.
it could.
Good point.
So anyway, just that kind of stuff that this doesn't cover.
okay, duly noted.
Okay, any
Move we
other
adjourn.
discussion? Thanks, George. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, we're adjourned. I
Good.
have 8:37.